Hey y'all, Grandma Rose here. Oh dear, I do apologize if you have been waiting for me to put out another video. Life has intervened and I have not been able to, but now I'm back on schedule and I'm back on schedule. What more can I say? If you have been working on the heel of your sock, you should have something that looks about like this. A different color, different pattern, but you should have a rectangle or maybe something close to a square that has stripes on it like that, ridges. This is what the slip stitch heel looks like. You could continue making it longer or shorter depending on your foot. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let me show you what's next. There's my tablet. And here's what we're doing. We're going to do the heel turn. So we're going to do row 1. These are called short rows. And that's where you knit partway across and then you turn around and you go back in the other direction. So you end up with a bulge in the middle is what it amounts to, because you're knitting the stitches in the middle more often than you're knitting the ones on the side. So what we're going to do, the first row, and I cast on 64 stitches. Now you may have cast on a different number. I cast on 64. So right here, 18, I'm going to slip 1 and I'm going to knit 18. Then I'm going to do what is called a decrease. This is SSK, and I will show you how to do that if you don't already know how to. Then after that decrease, we're going to knit 1 and we're going to turn around. SSK is easy, easy, easy. They're all easy. You just have to know how to do them, and once you know how to do them, they're easy. Slip 1 and knit 18. (16), (17), (18). Okay, so we knit 18. The next thing we're going to do is called slip, slip, knit, SSK. So we're going to, like we're going to knit, we put the needle in from the left side like we're going to knit, and just slip it off. Just like a slip stitch, except we're doing it instead of the purlwise, we're doing it knitwise. Slip. So we've slipped 2 stitches, that's the SS. And now we're going to knit it. To knit it, we're going to put this needle back in it. On the front, from the left to the right, just like that. And then just knit this one right here, like that. And you've done the slip, slip, knit, and you've got a decrease. And then the next one is just knit. Now what happens when you do this right here, this space right in here, creates a gap, and you're gonna see in the pattern, knit to the gap. Then it'll tell you what to do at the gap. That's what this is right here. That's the gap, where you've decreased and then you've knit another one as the gap. So on the back side, we're gonna slip 1, and we're gonna purl 7. Purl 7. Then what do we do next? So you purl 7, and then the next thing we're going to decrease again. This time we're just going to purl 2 together. So instead of just purling 1 stitch, you put your needle into 2 stitches. Do that again. Put your needle in 1 stitch, 2 stitches. Purl 2 together, then we're just going to purl it. We're going to purl both of them at the same time, and there's another decrease. And then purl another one. That made another gap. And turn it. So this is why they're called short rows. So what we're going to do, here's the stitches in the middle that are going to be the heel, the beginning of the heel. And then each time we're going to pick up 1 more on the sides. And that'll complete the heel, and it'll come out like a little cone where your heel is going to fit in. because these are short rows, and that's what they do. It makes extra stitches right here in the middle. Instructions on this say to slip one, knit to one stitch before the gap, and then with SSK, knit one and turn. So when you get here at the gap, when you SSK, you're going to pick up the stitch on one side of the gap, and on the other side of the gap, which is going to close the gap. And then we're going to knit the other one, and then we'll turn it around, and it'll make another gap. Well, you'll see, just a second. So here we go, slip one, and you don't have to count anymore. You just knit till you see the gap. Oops, I almost knit that last one. I wasn't supposed to. That's the stitch before the gap. Now you can see it. Do you see the gap? Put that down. And do you see how there's a space, a larger space right here between these two stitches than there is between these other stitches? That's what they call the gap. And we're going to close the gap by knitting, doing a decrease over it. So we're going to do that same SSK decrease, slip, slip, knit. Slip one on this side, slip one on that side, knit them, and knit one more, and turn. Purl side again, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to purl till we get to the gap, and then we're going until to one stitch before the gap, and then we're going to decrease across the gap to close it, and then purl one more and turn. So here we go, slip one, purl through those two stitches. See that? So I got to that, instead of purling one, you're just going to continue over and purl through those two stitches and purl one more and turn it over. And you continue with that, do the same thing, repeat those two rows until you've used up all of the stitches. So let me do that. So we're going to have, I've got left on each side, there should be the same number of stitches. So there's 2, 4, 6 stitches there, 2, 4, 6 stitches there. And you see what's happening there? Do you see that little pucker that we're getting right there? That's because it's what's called turning the heel. And we're creating the heel where the heel of your foot's going to go, right in there. So let's do this, and I'm going to do one more step after this. This is such a short little step, there's no reason for me not to continue and do the next thing. So we're going to do the heel turn, plus then we're going to pick up the stitches on the side. So let me continue doing this turn, and we'll get to that point where we're going to pick up the stitches. Do you see what this is making? Every time you slip that stitch at the beginning, this is creating this line of stitches right here, along here. It wouldn't be the end of the world if you missed one and forgot to slip a stitch, but all it would do would be just to, you wouldn't get this pattern in here. I've never not done it, so I don't know what would happen. However, I don't believe it would be the end of the world. You get on with this pattern and you look back and you say, uh-oh, I forgot to do that back there, and then you feel like you need to rip it back out. Probably not. We're getting there, y'all. Look at that. I think this may be the last one. See, look here, we're taking up this last stitch here. So this is the last stitch on the knit side. We're going to knit that one. Now, what it says is to repeat those 2 rows until all the stitches have been worked, but do not slip the first stitch on the last purl row. So that's where we are. We're to the last purl row. So we're not going to slip this stitch. We're going to just purl it. Another thing that I haven't shown you, when you need to tighten up the stitches, don't do it on the first stitch. Do it on the second stitch and it'll pull it tight. If you try to do it on the first stitch, it just doesn't work. Years of experience, pass that on to you before you try to do it the other way. Always, if you need to tighten up a stitch, tighten it on the second stitch, not the first one. Purl the last one, and you have just completed your heel turn. You see that? And here's what you've got. You have this, turn on the side, you see that? Do the same thing if you're knitting a baby bonnet. The old-fashioned bonnets have this at the back of the head. It's exactly the same thing. Okay, now let's see what the next thing it says to do. Okay, now you knit across and you pick up 17 gusset stitches. And then you pick up an extra stitch in the ladder between the stitches on the row below. Okay, so you'll have a total of 18 stitches picked up. Then we're going to knit across the instep, and then after you finish knitting across the instep, and you do that in pattern. Now the pattern has been established, so you'll continue to knit in pattern. Then when you get to the last stitch, then we'll pick up an extra stitch, like we did between the gusset stitches and knitting the instep, and then we'll go back and we'll pick up the stitches on the other side. So when it says to pick them up, you don't just pick them up, you pick them up and knit them at the same time. I'll show you how to do that. I will show you how to do that. Let's get it undone. Pull that thread out of here. The needle out of the thread. Okay, now I'm set. Oh, the turning the heel, you get your thread wrapped around it and it's not a big deal. So we're just going to knit all the way across, and then we get to this side of it, we're going to have to go in here and we're going to have to pick up the stitches. And that's the hardest thing. I really think this is the hardest part of the sock. This and picking up the stitches on the other side. But it's not completely daunting. The first time I did it, this is when I had to go back to my knit shop and get somebody to help me. We didn't have YouTube videos at that time. So let's get there and let's do it. And I'll show you exactly how to do it. And don't be concerned about it. It's not a big deal. Get the yarn where it's supposed to be, in the back, right? We're going to knit across. Okay. Now, this is the hardest part, I think. Now, it says to pick up 17 stitches. Now, let's find those 17 stitches. Where are they? Let's count here. Use the other end of this needle. How many stitches do we have here? Now, this is the edge. This is right here. This part right here is the stitches that we made when we turned this heel. And let's go back down here and start from this end and count these edge stitches. Now, these are the slip stitches. And if you remember at the very beginning, I said those slip stitches are going to be important because it's going to make them easy to see when it comes time to pick up the stitches. That's where we are right now. So let's get this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there's the 16 stitches that we did when I turned the heel, or when I knit the heel flap. Now it says to pick up 17 stitches. So you've got that slip stitch there, and then there's 2 other stitches right here. Let's get this first one right here. Put your needle through there, like that. Now we've got all these other ones. Now this next one is just it's not a slip stitch, so we're going to start this next stitch right here, which is one of the slip stitches along the heel flap. Now again, let's turn this over and show you. There's 2 legs on that. See the stitch right here? There's the right leg and there's the left leg, or the front leg and the back leg. We're going to pick up the front leg. So we're going to pick up along this edge right here. And that won't leave a ridge. If you pick up the other side, it'll leave a ridge on the front of your sock, which isn't a bad thing, I suppose. If that's what you want it to look like, you can do it that way. So we're going to knit into this stitch. We're going to knit into this stitch and continue all the way around until we get to 1 more stitch. That doesn't make sense. We're going to knit into each of these stitches along the side, each of the slip stitches along the side. We're going to knit into the front loop, the front leg of each of those slip stitches. And that looks like I split that stitch. Let's do this again. Okay. So we're getting all these extra stitches on here. You see that? There are not 32 stitches across the back of your heel. The way it's knit, there are fewer than 32 stitches. But at the end of this, we're going to get back down to that number. And that's what we're going to do after we've picked up these stitches. Don't want to get ahead of myself here. Going to pick up some more until we've got all of these heel flap stitches picked up. Okay, 1 more. It's easy to tell when you've done it in a different color. There's that last one. That's the last of the heel flap stitches. Now, the instructions say to pick up 1 more stitch. Now, when I first started knitting socks, and a lot of people who knit socks, when they go from here to knitting on this side right here, starting in pattern back on this needle, you end up with a hole right in here, right between there. And then when you finish it, you've got to close up that hole. You see that? See what's going to happen? There's going to be a hole right there. Now there's a trick to this. I learned to do this when I was first starting to knit socks. I searched the internet until I finally found instructions on what to do. And I'm passing on my knowledge, what I learned. Let me go ahead and get these stitches back over here, because we're going to be knitting those next. Okay, now we've got this down. We're going to knit. We're going to pick up a stitch between here and between here. And what I do is I pick up below this stitch right here. You see this loop right here? And there's a stitch right in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 2 things. I'm going to pick up this loop right here, which is below the stitch I just knit. And I'm going to pick up right in here, like that, one of these stitches. It doesn't have to be that one. It can be between these stitches. It can be that right there, which is probably a good thing. Let's do that one. Put that on your needle. Put that on your needle. Put this on your left needle. And we're going to knit those 2 together. It's like decreasing a stitch. It's a little tricky. There you go. Now, what that does, it creates another stitch right in there, and you don't have a hole. It eliminates that hole between the heel flap and the front of the sock. And that's very important. I mean, you can take your needle and thread and you can close it up. At the end of it, if you have a hole there, when you start to weave in your ends at the end, just take some of your yarn and just take a little stitch there, and it'll close up the hole. It's not a big deal. However, that is the way to eliminate that. Now, we're at the front of the sock now. We're not going to knit it on this needle anymore. We're going to pull this up, give us the room. Remember, we're knitting on on 2 loops like that. Whoops, I already had that on the needle, didn't I? I didn't need to do that. So we're going back to knitting in the round again. Now, this is the same pattern that we were doing before, so we're going to continue in pattern. Now, what we want to see here, here's the purl bump here, here's a purl bump here. See those right there? That means that this next round we're going to do is just to simply knit in the round. Now, I don't want to do this in the gold yarn. I'm going to switch back to this color yarn again. And I know I told you before just to break your yarn. This is hard to break your yarn right in here. Let's leave a length of it, 4 or 5 inches. Enough to work with when it comes time to weave in the ends at the end. And just cut it. Cut it just right there. You're done with this until the toe. So we've got the yarn. Here's my new yarn. I'm just, like we did before, I'm just going to leave a length of yarn. That's about 6 inches or so. Put it right back here. Knit. And then I'm just holding it right here in my finger. I'm just going to knit. I'm going to knit 6. Well, actually, I'm going to knit all the way across and keep my finger on it so it doesn't pull out. And once you get 2 or 3 stitches, you can let go. There we go. At the very end, we'll weave that in, and it will not make a loose stitch. You'll see at the very end. It'll irritate you at first, but it's not a big deal. It'll go away and it'll be just fine. There's no reason to knot those. And you know, I could have used this yarn when I picked up these stitches along the side. I could have started with this yarn at the heel. And probably what I should have done. But it's not going to make a difference. Okay, that right there is loose. We can fix it. We'll fix it later. It's a loose stitch right now. Now we're going to slide this needle, pull it out to get those other stitches back over here. Now, just get the needle out of the way. Now the next thing to do is just what we did before. But this time we're picking up the stitches on this side. It's exactly the same thing. But what we're going to do here, just like we did before, we're going to pick up that first stitch between here and here. So just exactly what we did before. I'm going to pick up a stitch right in here, and then we're going to pick up not this stitch. This is the stitch we're going to pick up and knit. But we want to pick up like over here. Maybe this stitch, not that stitch, not the first stitch. Let me get the needle to show you. So this stitch right here is the stitch that we're going to be picking up. That's on the heel flap. We want to close this gap right here. Remember, it's like the same thing as a gap. There's going to be a hole if we don't do that. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. With this needle right here. And we're going to come in down in here and pick up a stitch. Like pick up a stitch there. And we don't want to pick up this stitch right here because we're going to knit that one. But we can come right in here, right below it, and get that. See that? And I'm going to put these two on this needle tip. It makes it a lot easier. So those are the stitches that we're going to knit. We're going to knit them together. And that will close that. And we'll not have We will not have a hole there. Now, pick up these stitches again, just like we did before. We're going to pick up 17. There's 16 of these on the edge of the sock, on the edge of the flap. So there's 16 along here on the edge of the flap, and I just knit one of them. And we're going to knit all of those, and then we're going to get one more up here. So that'll give us a total of 18. The one we just knit here, that where we closed that hole, and then the ones were on the edge, right in there. Those are those slip stitches along the edge. So we've got one, and we're going to get 15 more of those. And just exactly what we did before. We're just knitting them. Well, it's a little tricky. Like I said, this is the hardest part for me. This is the most difficult part, where I pull out your hair. Here's the first one, and go slowly. There's no reason to rush. Very slowly and carefully. You need to keep tension on this yarn here. Don't want to strangle it, but keep tension on it to keep it from falling off the needle when you're doing this. There. Do each one of those all the way across the edge. You've seen it before. I'm not doing anything new at this point. You just want to hold on to this and keep it, and go slowly. Because, whoops, I missed one. There we go. Do it again. And go slow. Very slowly. There's no rush. And if you've never done this before, it's a pain. You're going to wish you hadn't started this. It's hard. But you'll get through it, and you'll be proud of yourself when you're done. So what we're doing is we're making the gusset, the side edge. You know what a gusset is, but on your sock, it's this part. I'll show you in a second. I'll show you a picture in a minute. I was going to point to it, and I realized you can't see that. You finish this. Whoops, I keep getting out of the camera. Okay, that's the last one. Oops, now we need to pick up one more. Let's see how many do we have here. That's my dog. That's my Chihuahua. Sorry about that. Okay, this is the first one that we did right there. That one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So we need 18 total. Now you may be different because your heel may be longer or it may be shorter, but you want to pick up all the ones along the side of the heel flap plus 2 more. One at the beginning of the heel flap and one at the end of the heel flap. We're going to get that one, and then we're going to get one of these. Let's get that one right there. That's a good one. And then just knit that one. When you've finished picking up all of the stitches along the side. Congratulate yourself. Pat yourself in the back. You have just picked up all the stitches. Look at this. Now here's what you've got. And pull this out. Get these back of the heel stitches back on the needle. So there. So that's what we've got. What we want now, this is going to be, this is all this along this edge and then along this edge. And this is going to be the bottom of the foot. So we want to count 18 stitches on this side. These stitches are already over here. We only want these across the front here. So we've got these 6, these 2, these 6, and these 2. Here's 6 and 2, and there's 3, 6, and 2. All of the rest of these are going on the heel. I'm going to pull this up right here. Pull that loop up right there. There we go. And now, these are the heel stitches. Let's get those back on this needle. Oh dear, I've got a dog fight going on. That noise you hear is the Chihuahua. He's the one that makes noises. Okay. So right here, we've got this loop here. We've got a loop here. And these stitches that are left are the ones that we're knitting. Let's get these back over here on that needle. Back over here on this needle. And we're going to knit across the heel. And then I'll show you what we do next. Then I'm going to do just a couple more rows. And then we're going to leave you on your own. I just dealt with dog issues. Okay, now we're back to knitting across the heel of the sock. And we're going to knit up the side of the sock. And then the first thing we're going to do on the side is we're going to decrease one. Not at the very last stitch, but the next to last. I'll show you in a minute. Now, the pattern says, if you're reading along on your pattern and you've got the pattern and not just waiting for me to tell you what to do, at the very last of this paragraph, it says the beginning of the round is now located at the center of the heel. Now, what that means is if you were knitting on double pointed needles, you would have 2 needles back here at the back. Similar to this, I'll show you in a second. Let's knit across here. And let me show you something else you could do. And I don't generally, but it can be done. We're almost up. They're about at the center of the heel, about there. Okay, so we've got an equal number of stitches on these 2 needles. This would be like if you had double pointed needles. You would have 2 needles at the back of the sock and 1 or 2 across the front. Like that. That would be like knitting on double pointed needles. And what this is saying is actually the round starts on this needle here. Not across the front, but it starts in the beginning at the middle of the heel. That's not a big deal. Don't even think about it. I think the reason it says that, and I think I got that off of another pattern where I learned to knit socks. And I thought it was important to know, so I added that to this pattern too. This is to remember that the first time you decrease is going to be on this needle, because this is the first needle of the round. And it really doesn't matter. It's going to make 1/2 of a round difference at the end of your sock. It doesn't really matter. But this is just a reminder that you want to decrease at the end of this needle. And not this one. So let's knit across, continue knitting across. And another thing I wanted to show you here, because you can do this here. We want to get back, in this case, we want to get back to 32 stitches. Now you can count the stitches here across and across here. And you can put a stitch marker in here and a stitch marker in here. 32 stitches along here, and you'll know when you get back to those markers that you've finished. You finish the decreases, and then you can start just knitting without worrying about decreasing. Because all of these stitches that we picked up here on the side, we've got to get back down to 32 stitches on what is going to be the back needle. I'll show you in a second. We'll count how many stitches are there. So continue knitting. Now when you're doing decreases, I'll talk about that while I'm knitting here. When you're doing decreases for this kind of thing, you do them in pairs. You'll do 1 decrease on one side and another decrease on the other side, and they're going to match. So we're going to do 2 different kinds of decreases. One was going to be pointing in one direction, and the other will point in the other direction. They'll be a mirror of each other. And so these decreases there's 2 different kinds of decreases. So if you haven't already learned how to do these, this is a good time to learn. Not only would be learning how to knit a sock if you've never done it before, but you're going to learn 2 different kinds of decreases. Now you've actually already learned them when we were turning the heel, right? We did an SSK on the front side, and then on the back side, on the purl side, we purled 2 together. Well, on this side, we're going to do an SSK, slip, slip, knit, and we're going to do a knit 2 together. Those are like mirrored decreases. They're 2 different kinds of decreases. Now we're on the gusset. If you have your pattern, we're on the gusset. It says decrease gusset stitches until there are 64 stitches total remaining. Or if you 56 or 72, depending on the size of the sock that you're knitting. It says you knit in pattern across the instep. Okay. Round 1, you knit to 3 stitches before the instep. So we're on round 1. To 3 stitches before the instep, which means I need to knit 4 more stitches. See that? There's the 3 stitches before the instep, and there's 4 more. So we'll knit these 4 more. Okay, we've got 3 stitches left. So in round 1, we knit to 3 stitches before the instep. We're going to knit 2 together. This is just like the purling 2 together that we did turning the heel. But this time we're knitting 2 together. So we're just going to knit 2 together. Easy, easy peasy. Knit 2 together and knit 1. Okay. And we're going to turn this around. We're going to knit the instep, and we'll knit the instep in pattern. Pull that out. Y'all, you know how to do that. And this is the knit 6 purl 2 round. So we're going to knit across the instep in pattern. Oops, did I? You know what? I had forgotten to purl those 2 stitches. Let's back up and do that. I was talking and I forgot. I do that a lot when I'm with a group of people. So if you're knitting with a group of people, it's easy. Good choice to bring something easy that you don't have to think too hard on. Because you'll get talking and then you'll forget to do something important. So socks is a really good thing. Plain socks that don't have a lot of lace and patterns in them. This is an easy pattern. Easy to knit with if you're knitting with a group of people. And that's one of the fun things about knitting and crocheting is you can find friends that like to do that too, and you can sit and chat with them, have chat over coffee or whatever, tea, juice, whatever you want to drink, a toddy at night, and knit. And it's fun just to chat and knit, and we all know about that. We have our friends that have common interest. And it's always fun to get together with them and share that interest. And talking about knitting and crocheting is always fun. So how many stitches do we have here? 5. I'm going to purl these last 2. And we'll be back at the gusset again. Turn it around. All these ends that are hanging out. We're going to get these stitches back on the needle. These are the heel. Right now it's the gusset. It's going to be the back bottom of your foot actually. It's going to be the side of the foot and the bottom, and there are a lot of stitches here. We said we were going to count them. Let me do. Now we've already decreased 1 over here. Remember that we did this stitch right here. The second stitch right there is a decreased stitch. We knit 2 together. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to knit 1, and then we're going to decrease these 2 stitches. So we're always going to have one extra stitch on this side of it. Okay, now let's count and see how many we have total. Okay, I have 55 stitches. And I've already decreased one, so that means we had 56 to begin with. Have to get back down to 32. So that's a lot of stitches that we're going to have to decrease. But they're paired. You're going to decrease one on each side. So each decreased round, you're going to be decreasing 2 stitches. One on one side and one on the other side. So let's do the second one. Now the second one is paired, remember I said. So we did knit 2 together on the first side. That would be on, if you're holding the back of your sock, the bottom of your sock in front, then it'll be the one on the left side. And if you're just beginning, if you just come off of the instep and you're knitting on the right side of the bottom, then you're going to knit a different decrease. You're going to do an SSK, just like we did on the when we did the turning the heel. Let me get this yarn where it's supposed to be. It should be back here. And when you've got all this stuff, it's just complicated. You want the yarn to be in the back because we're knitting. Remember that. That's easy. I don't need to tell you that, but just to remind myself because it was in the way. Okay, the first stitch we're talking about. So what did I say? We had 56 stitches. Have to decrease back down to 32. So that means at the beginning or at the end and the beginning of this needle that's going to be in the back, every other round we're going to decrease a stitch. So that'll be 2 stitches total. We don't do it every single round. We're going to do it every other round. So we're going to knit the first one. Be sure I'm knitting on that and not the tail end back here. There's one, knit one, and then we're going to SSK, slip, slip, and put the 2 together, and knit. And we've decreased a stitch, and you just knit the rest of them. And this round we're going to knit all the way across. We're not going to decrease at the end. So what you're going to do is every other round, on alternate rounds, you'll decrease at the beginning and the end, or the end and the beginning. And that is a little confusing. This is the way the pattern, the other patterns that I had knit before I designed this pattern, did it this way, and I thought that was just the way you did it. But there is really no reason whatsoever that you couldn't decrease it, say the beginning of this round, the end of this round, and then knit it all the way around, and then do your decreases at the beginning and the end, instead of at the end, knit around in the beginning. There is really no reason why you have to do it that way. If you want to do it the other way, it's not going to make a difference at all. It will not make one difference whatsoever in the way your sock looks at the end. And if it's easier for you to remember, then do it that way. So what you would do in that case is when you knit across these back stitches for the first time, you wouldn't decrease until you came back around to what I just did. And then you would decrease at the beginning and the end. For me, that's easier to remember, and if you want to do it that way, do it that way. Like I said, it's not going to make one difference whatsoever. It'll mean that you finish your heel, or you finish decreasing for your heel one round later, and that is not going to make a difference. So you're going to continue decreasing every other round at the beginning and the end, or rather the end and the beginning, however you do it, until you get back down to the original number of stitches. And at that point, you just continue knitting flat, stockinette stitch on the bottom of the foot, and knitting in pattern on the instep. At the end of the gusset, this section that we're working on right now, so what we have done, we have turned the heel, we've picked up the gusset stitches, And now we're knitting the gusset. And we're going to continue knitting the gusset until the sock is as long as we need it to be before we start the toe decreases. If you're doing 56 stitches, when your sock is 1.5 inches shorter than you want the finished length to be, then we'll stop and you'll start decreasing for the toe. For the 64 stitches, which is the size I'm working on, we want it to be 1.75, so 1 3/4 inch shorter than the desired finished length. And if you're doing 72 stitches, it's going to be 2 inches shorter. Now, you don't want your sock to be exactly the length of your foot. It needs to be a little bit snugger than the exact length of the foot, so that you consider what is considered negative ease. Now, I should probably look this up and tell you how much negative ease to do. Now stop there until I have another video and I show you what to do. The next video will be showing the toe decreases, and then after that, the last video will be doing the Kitchener stitch, and then I believe I will probably do, at the end of the Kitchener stitch, I will show you how to finish and to weave in your ends and finish the sock. There is no reason for me to stop at that point. I will continue on. So there will be only 2 more videos in this series, and I hope you're enjoying it. Bye, y'all. See you next time, and happy knitting.